Every case holds secrets. Some are solved, but many remain lost in time. When the evidence fades, we open the true cold files.
Asha Jaquila Degree was a 9-year-old girl living with her family in Shelby, North Carolina, a quiet, rural town in Cleveland County. She lived on Oak Crest Drive, a street nestled in a modest neighborhood, where most families knew each other and life moved at a steady, predictable pace. Asha was the younger child of Harold and Aquila Degree and shared a close bond with her older brother, O'Brien. The Degree household was grounded in discipline, structure, and faith, with both parents working and keeping close watch over their children's lives. At the time of her disappearance, Asha was a 4th grade student at Falston Elementary School. Known for being shy and well-behaved, she had no history of disciplinary issues or emotional problems. Teachers described her as respectful and attentive, and her academic performance reflected consistency and effort. She played on her school's basketball team and attended church regularly with her family. Her life was carefully structured, and her parents were intentional about keeping their children safe from external influences, including limiting access to television and the internet. On Sunday, February 13, 2000, the Degree family followed their usual weekend routine. They attended church that morning, returned home, and later visited relatives to celebrate Valentine's Day. That night, Shelby, North Carolina, was hit by a storm that caused a temporary power outage. Despite the weather, the family eventually settled in for the evening. Asha and her older brother O'Brien shared a bedroom. The last confirmed sighting of Asha occurred around 2:30 a.m. when her father, Harold Degree, checked on both children and saw her sleeping in her bed. Sometime between 2:30 and 3:15 a.m., Asha quietly left the house. She had packed a backpack with personal belongings, though the specific items she chose to take were not immediately known. There were no signs of forced entry at the home, and nothing in the house indicated a struggle or any kind of break-in. Asha's departure was silent and deliberate. She left behind no note and did not tell anyone she was going. When the family woke up around 6:30 a.m. on the morning of February 14th, they immediately noticed Asha was missing. Her absence triggered panic and confusion. A search of the house and nearby areas yielded no sign of her. Realizing the severity of the situation, the Degrees contacted local authorities, launching what would become a massive investigation. Given Asha's quiet nature and the close supervision she had always been under, the family could not comprehend why she would leave on her own. Abduction was their first fear, as nothing in Asha's behavior or background made this event seem like a runaway. The hours between when she was last seen and when she was discovered missing would mark the beginning of a mystery that remains unsolved decades later. Between 3:30 and 4:15 a.m. on February 14, 2000, multiple motorists reported seeing a young girl walking along North Carolina Highway 18. This location was over a mile from Asha Degree's home. The girl, later confirmed to be Osha, was walking southbound in the direction of Falston. Despite the early morning hour, darkness, and rain, the sightings placed her firmly on the roadside, providing a crucial timeline update and confirming that she had left her home voluntarily and was alive at least an hour after her family last saw her. The stretch of Highway 18 where Asha was seen is rural and poorly lit. There are no sidewalks or consistent streetlights in the area, making it a hazardous route for anyone, especially a 9-year-old child, traveling alone in inclement weather. The conditions that night were cold and wet, adding to the danger. Despite this, Asha continued walking with determination, suggesting she may have had a specific destination or meeting place in mind. One of the witnesses, a truck driver, turned his vehicle around after seeing her and attempted to check on her well-being. As he approached, Asha abruptly ran into the woods, avoiding contact. This behavior indicates she was likely trying to avoid being recognized or stopped. These independent accounts were the last known confirmed sightings of Asha Degree. They remain essential pieces of evidence in understanding her final known movements and raise critical questions about why she was out, walking alone in such dangerous conditions. On February 15th, 2000, one day after Asha Degree disappeared, a business owner made a quiet discovery that would soon become a critical piece of the investigation. The owner of Turner's Upholstery, located along the same stretch of North Carolina Highway 18 where Asha was last seen, found several curious items inside a shed on their property. Among them were candy wrappers, a pencil, and a Mickey Mouse hair bow. Although these may have seemed insignificant at first, they would later be linked directly to Asha. At the time, the connection was not immediately made. The business owner did not report the items to law enforcement until February 17th, 2 days after the discovery and 3 days after Asha vanished. This delay added difficulty to an already urgent and time-sensitive case. The location of the shed, set well back from the highway, prompted investigators to question how and why Asha's belongings ended up there. Did she seek shelter from the storm on her own? Or was she led there by someone? One especially troubling piece of evidence emerged from the shed: a photograph of an unidentified young girl. Asha's family did not recognize the girl, nor did staff at her school. The photo added an unsettling new layer to the investigation. Investigators began to consider whether Asha believed she was going to meet this person, or if the image belonged to someone else entirely, perhaps even someone involved in her disappearance. The shed became the first physical location tied to Asha after she left home. In August 2001, 18 months after Asha Degree disappeared, a major discovery was made that re-energized the investigation. While digging an access road for a new home in Burke County, a construction worker unearthed a black and beige backpack buried in the ground. It had been carefully double-wrapped in black plastic bags and buried less than 50 yards off North Carolina Highway 18, the same road Asha had been seen walking along before she vanished. Written on the bag were her name and telephone number, confirming beyond doubt that it belonged to her. The location of the discovery, nearly 30 miles from her home in Shelby, was startling. Inside the backpack were 2 items that did not belong to Asha: a New Kids on the Block t-shirt and a copy of McElligot's Pool by Dr. Seuss. Her family did not recognize either item. At the time, investigators chose not to release the contents of the bag to the public. It wasn't until October 2018, 17 years later, that the details became public knowledge. The book itself raised additional questions. It was eventually traced to the Falston Elementary School library, where Asha was a student, though it was unclear who had checked it out. School records no longer existed to confirm whether Asha had borrowed it or if it came from someone else connected to the case. The deliberate concealment of the backpack, the distance from her last known location, and the inclusion of items that weren't hers led some investigators to consider a deeply unsettling possibility. The site may have served as a kind of trophy stash, evidence that whoever buried the backpack had a personal or psychological attachment to the crime and possibly intended to return to the site in the future. The central question in Asha Degree's case remains: why did she leave home that night? For a sheltered 9-year-old girl with no history of misbehavior, her decision to walk alone into the stormy night is both shocking and puzzling. Investigators and the public alike have wrestled with theories, but none offer complete answers. One possibility is that Asha was groomed. Despite having no internet access at home and limited outside exposure, she could have been manipulated by someone within her small circle, perhaps a figure from school, basketball, or church. Her family was careful and protective, but someone familiar might have gained her trust over time, convincing her to leave voluntarily. The route she took and her apparent determination suggest she believed she was going to meet someone. The photograph found in the shed, depicting an unknown girl not recognized by Asha's family or school, raised even more questions. Was this the person Asha thought she was meeting? Or did the image belong to someone else involved in her disappearance? The discovery of her backpack 30 miles away, along the same highway she was last seen walking, points to a possible offender who frequently used NC-18. The deliberate concealment of her belongings and the presence of unrelated items strengthen the idea of premeditation. It suggests someone who knew the area well, potentially a local with consistent access to children, perhaps through extracurricular activities or community roles. Despite years of investigation, these pieces remain unconnected. Each clue adds depth, but also uncertainty, feeding into a complex web of possibilities. Asha's case remains unsolved, suspended between disturbing theories and a deep longing for resolution. In the years following Asha Degree's disappearance, multiple prison inmates have come forward claiming knowledge or involvement in the case. While each tip brought temporary hope, none led to a breakthrough, and all ultimately proved fruitless. In 2004, a prisoner tipped off police to a location in Lawndale, South Carolina. Investigators dug at the site, which was about 6 miles from Asha's home. They uncovered bones and a pair of khaki trousers. However, the bones were determined to be from an animal, and no connection to Asha was ever established. The lead went cold. In 2010, another inmate claimed involvement in Asha's case. Despite initial interest, his story yielded no credible evidence, and investigators reached another dead end. Then, in 2020, a third inmate, Marcus Mellon, sent a letter to a local newspaper. He alleged he knew how Asha was killed and where her body could be found. This prompted a fresh investigation and renewed attention from law enforcement. However, once again, nothing verifiable came from the tip. These repeated false leads have caused understandable frustration for investigators and deep emotional strain for the Degree family. The recurring pattern has raised concerns that some inmates may be seeking attention, bargaining for reduced sentences, or inserting themselves into high-profile cases without genuine knowledge. Commentators and podcast hosts have called for greater media responsibility when covering unverified prison confessions. While every lead deserves to be evaluated, publicizing them prematurely can create false hope and distract from credible investigative efforts. Over 2 decades have passed since Asha Degree vanished into the dark, rainy night. Today she would be 32 years old. Despite the time that has elapsed, her case remains unsolved, and the pain of her disappearance continues to shape the lives of those closest to her. Her parents, Harold and Aquila Degree, have never stopped hoping for answers. Aquila has remained steadfast in her belief that her daughter is still alive. For the Degree family, Valentine's Day is no longer just their wedding anniversary. It is also a stark and painful reminder of the day their daughter disappeared. In 2015, a renewed effort was launched. The FBI, the North Carolina State Bureau of Investigation, and the Cleveland County Sheriff's Office came together for a full reinvestigation. This collaboration brought the FBI's Child Abduction Rapid Deployment Team into the case. Hundreds of new leads were generated, though no resolution followed. Still, the investigation remains open and active, with a dedicated tip line encouraging anyone with information to come forward. Asha's story continues to resonate, not only with her family, but with the wider community. From social media pages to national missing person databases like Uncovered, people have worked tirelessly to ensure her case is not forgotten. As this section closes, viewers are reminded, if they know anything, no matter how small, they should contact the FBI or the Cleveland County Sheriff's Office. One tip could finally bring answers to a family that has waited far too long. Donald Messier was a 34-year-old man from Waterbury, Vermont, known for his kind heart, steady work ethic, and deep love for NASCAR. Those who knew him best described him as a gentle giant and a teddy bear of a man, someone who would give you his last dollar without hesitation. He had a quiet, grounded lifestyle and was considered a homebody who rarely traveled far from his hometown. Donald was deeply connected to his family, and had a wide circle of loyal friends. His warmth and loyalty earned him several affectionate nicknames, including Donnie, Bubba, Mule, and Huggy Bear. At the time of his disappearance, Donald was living with his sister Amy Currier and her family. Despite going through a recent divorce, Amy and Donald's therapist both noted he had been showing signs of emotional recovery. He seemed to be in good spirits and was beginning to move forward with his life. Donald worked hard to maintain stability, holding down 2 jobs: the night shift at Green Mountain Coffee Roasters and a part-time position at Billings Mobile Gas Station, both located in Waterbury. Physically, Donald stood between 5 feet 11 inches and 6 feet tall, weighing approximately 230 to 270 pounds. He had dark brown hair, a mustache, and a goatee. He bore a small birthmark on his neck, a scar on his chin, and surgical scars on both wrists from carpal tunnel surgery. When last seen, he was wearing a black and blue plaid button-up shirt, blue jeans, work boots, and possibly a hat. His gentle personality, strong family ties, and dedication to those around him made his sudden disappearance not only baffling, but deeply heartbreaking for everyone who knew him. On Saturday, October 14th, 2006, Donald Messier's day began like any other. He reported to work at his part-time job at Billings Mobile Gas Station in Waterbury and completed his shift by 3 p.m. From there, he went to his grandfather's shop, where he spent part of the afternoon working on the brakes of his vehicle. Later that evening, Donald met up with a friend in Duxbury to watch a NASCAR race, one of his favorite pastimes. Everything about his day appeared routine and uneventful. After the race, Donald made his way to a house party in the nearby town of Waitsfield, Vermont. The gathering, held off Route 100, was attended by approximately 50 to 60 people. Donald was seen socializing and appeared to be in good spirits. Witnesses reported that he did not seem intoxicated or troubled in any visible way. Between 12:30 and 2 a.m. on Sunday, October 15th, Donald was seen leaving the party. Around 1:30 a.m., he placed a phone call to a friend. This was the last known communication made from his phone. After that call, Donald Messier vanished. Both he and his vehicle, a bright red 1997 Ford F-150 pickup truck, disappeared without a trace. The truck had distinctive features, including dual exhaust, a moon visor, a black tonneau cover, and NASCAR sticker numbers in the rear window. It was as though he and the truck had simply vanished into thin air. The day had started normally, filled with work, familiar routines, and time spent with friends. There were no outward signs of distress or danger. But by the early hours of October 15th, 2006, Donald Messier was gone, and no one knew why. In the hours after Donald Messier left the Waitsfield party, there was no immediate alarm. His sister, Amy Currier, wasn't initially concerned when he didn't return home that Sunday. She believed he had plans with a friend and assumed he had stayed elsewhere for the night. But when Monday arrived and Donald failed to report for his night shift at the Green Mountain Coffee Roasters plant, something completely out of character, her concern quickly escalated. Amy began calling his cell phone repeatedly. At first, the phone rang but went unanswered. Eventually, all calls went straight to voicemail. After confirming that Donald had not been home since Saturday, and realizing no one had seen or heard from him since early Sunday morning, the family grew increasingly anxious. On October 18th, 3 days after he was last seen, Amy officially reported Donald missing to the Waterbury Police Department. The case was soon transferred to the Vermont State Police. That same day, a press release was issued to inform the public of Donald's disappearance. Law enforcement treated the case with urgency. In early November, they followed up with another public notice, this time providing a detailed description of Donald's missing vehicle. A red 1997 Ford F-150 pickup with Vermont plates, dual exhaust, a moon visor, a black tonneau cover, and NASCAR stickers in the rear window. Hikers and hunters were urged to be on the lookout for any sign of the vehicle. Search efforts expanded quickly. Police scoured the Waterbury Reservoir and granite quarries in Barr, looking for possible crash sites or clues. They also monitored Donald's debit and credit card transactions, phone activity, and bank records, but no activity was detected. Despite thorough searches and media outreach, there was no trace of Donald Messier or his truck. The investigation had begun, but without evidence, it faced an immediate wall of silence. The last confirmed sighting of Donald Messier was at a house party in Waitsfield, Vermont, during the early hours of Sunday, October 15th, 2006. The party, according to witnesses, Donald appeared to be in a good mood, was not visibly intoxicated, and left the gathering alone sometime between 12:30 and 2 a.m. His last known phone call was made around 1:30 a.m. to a friend. After that, both Donald and his truck disappeared without a trace. Despite the large number of attendees, there has been a lasting and puzzling silence surrounding the events of that night. Few people from the party have spoken publicly, and most have offered little beyond the basic statement that Donald seemed fine. For a community as close-knit as Waitsfield, the lack of participation in search efforts by those who attended the gathering raised red flags for Donald's friends and family. This silence only deepened suspicions as time went on. Donald's close friend Chris, who did not attend the party, expressed concerns that something may have happened that night. Rumors began circulating about a possible altercation linked to a love triangle or the presence of drugs and firearms at the party. While there's no evidence to confirm these theories, Chris noted that Donald, who rarely drank and avoided hard substances, might have become unintentionally involved in something far beyond his control. The partygoers' consistent unwillingness to talk, paired with their absence from the volunteer search efforts, created a troubling contradiction. Though nothing concrete has ever been proven, the combination of silence and rumor has continued to cast a long shadow over the last place Donald Messier was ever seen alive. In the early stages of the investigation, law enforcement considered two primary theories to explain Donald Messier's sudden disappearance. The first centered on the possibility of suicide, driven by emotional distress following his recent divorce. However, this theory was not strongly supported by those closest to him. Both his family and his therapist stated that Donald had been making progress and showing signs of emotional recovery. He was reportedly in good spirits on the day he vanished, which conflicted with any suggestion of suicidal intent. The second theory proposed that Donald may have swerved to avoid an animal, such as a moose, and accidentally drove off the road. Given the rural nature of Vermont's roads and the frequent presence of wildlife, this scenario was plausible. Still, the complete disappearance of both Donald and his truck made this explanation hard to accept. Despite years of search efforts, including sonar sweeps and land-based searches, no trace of the vehicle or Donald was found. Even when Hurricane Irene reshaped the local terrain in 2011, nothing surfaced. Over the years, investigators received numerous tips, some pointing to foul play, others to accidental scenarios, but none led to verified evidence. Rumors circulated, but each one faded without resolution. As leads dried up, the investigation stalled. Lieutenant John McCallum of the Vermont State Police summarized the case's frustrating ambiguity. "We don't know what happened to him. We don't have information to say he was a victim of harm, or to say that any other possible theory is valid. With no physical evidence, no witnesses coming forward, and no activity on Donald's accounts, the case entered a prolonged standstill. Each theory brought only more questions, none of which could be conclusively answered. Nearly 16 years after Donald Messier vanished without a trace, new momentum arrived through an unlikely source. A volunteer dive team known as Adventures with Purpose. The group, widely respected for their success in solving cold cases using advanced sonar equipment, joined the search in October 2021. That initial effort focused on the Waterbury Reservoir, a large body of water near where Donald was last seen. Despite their thorough scans, the only object recovered was an abandoned boat, a frustrating but not unusual result in cold case dives. Even with the discovery of Donald Messier's truck in the Winooski River, the most pressing questions remain unanswered. The vehicle was found just a few miles from his last known location, yet it went undetected for nearly 16 years, despite multiple searches. How was it missed for so long? Equally puzzling is the silence from those who attended the house party in Waitsfield. In a tight-knit town, it's unusual that so few people have come forward. Rumors of a possible altercation, drug involvement, or a cover-up persist, but no one has offered verifiable information. What really happened that night? Inside the recovered truck, only a few personal items were found: a jacket, snapshot watch, and glasses, but no human remains. During the truck's recovery, it flipped over, possibly disturbing key evidence. Weeks later, volunteers found a rifle, clothing, CDs, and bone fragments along the shoreline, though it's unclear if the bones were human. Police still can't confirm whether Donald was in the vehicle when it entered the river, or if foul play occurred. His family remains in painful limbo. His case is still listed as an active missing person file, and their hope for answers hasn't faded. 16 years later, one truth remains: someone knows what happened. Until they speak, the mystery of Donald Messier endures. On the evening of October 12, 2018, 16-year-old Carly Gousset told her father, Zach, and stepmother, Melissa, that she was going to attend a high school football game. The couple granted her permission, unaware that Carly had made different plans. Instead of heading to the stadium, she went to a party on Dixon Lane in Bishop, California, accompanied by her boyfriend Donald. At the party, Carly smoked marijuana. According to Donald, she had a severe reaction to the drug, one that was visibly more intense than usual. He speculated that the marijuana might have been laced, or that Carly was simply not used to its effects. Shortly after smoking, Carly began acting extremely paranoid. She grew frightened by the music playing at the party, became visibly uncomfortable around people she knew, including Donald, and refused to be touched. Then, in a sudden panic, she bolted from the gathering and disappeared into the dark night, instructing Donald not to follow her. Concerned, Carly called Melissa and told her she was scared and booking it down Dixon Lane. Melissa drove out to pick her up, and later described Carly as pale, with enlarged pupils and a clear look of fear on her face. During the short ride home, Carly moved erratically inside the vehicle, switching from seat to seat and expressing irrational fears, believing at one point that the car might kill her. This series of events marks a sharp shift in Carly's mental and emotional state, transforming what began as a typical Friday night into the first disturbing chapter of her disappearance. After returning home from the party, Carly Gousset's behavior remained erratic and deeply unsettling. According to her stepmother, Melissa Gousset, the 16-year-old appeared visibly frightened and emotionally unstable. She sat curled up in a corner of the room, oscillating between intense fear and moments of affection. Her thoughts were scattered. At times, she confessed confusion, saying she didn't know what was wrong. At others, she clung to comforting childlike rituals, asking to paint her toenails or read the Bible. Recognizing the severity of Carly's state, Melissa began recording her on audio, hoping to later demonstrate how much the drugs had affected her. The recording captured a wide range of emotional swings. Carly expressed regret with statements like, "I really messed up today," and affectionately repeated, "I love you." But her voice also carried fear and suspicion. She asked questions such as, "Are you going to call 911? And am I going to live until tomorrow?" In one particularly troubling moment, she even accused Melissa of possibly killing her. Melissa responded by calling the idea preposterous, attempting to reassure Carly that she was safe. Melissa stayed by Carly's side until around 3 a.m., watching her carefully. Although Carly eventually appeared to calm down, Melissa continued to check on her periodically throughout the early and morning hours. Eventually, she fell asleep. This segment marks the final time Carly was definitively seen by someone inside the home. Melissa's audio recording now stands as the last documented record of Carly's mental and emotional state before her disappearance, offering a disturbing window into the chaos and confusion of those final hours. On the morning of October 13th, 2018, Melissa Gousset woke between 7:15 and 7:30 a.m. As she moved through the house, she noticed something was wrong. The front door was slightly open. Instinctively, she checked Carly's room, only to find it empty. Carly was gone. Her cell phone, however, was still on the kitchen island, untouched. The sight of the abandoned phone sent an immediate wave of panic through the household. Melissa quickly woke up Carly's father, Zach Gousset, and told him their daughter had disappeared. The two began a frantic search of the surrounding neighborhood, driving slowly through nearby roads and calling out Carly's name. They hoped she had simply gone for a walk to clear her head, or maybe stepped outside and lost track of time. But as the minutes passed with no sign of her, concern deepened. While still in the car, Zach contacted Carly's biological mother, Lindsay Fairley, to inform her of the developing situation. Despite the distance between them, Lindsay was immediately alarmed and emotionally shaken. The call made it clear that whatever was happening was far from a typical teenage rebellion. Shortly after, the family reported Carly missing to the Mono County Sheriff's Department. The details they provided were troubling. A vulnerable teenager, clearly unstable the night before, had disappeared without taking her phone, leaving behind no note, no plan, and no obvious destination. This section captures the disorienting first moments of Carly's disappearance, when hope and panic collided. Unlike most missing teen cases, this one lacked the usual signs of a planned escape. Instead, it felt urgent, unplanned, and deeply out of character, prompting authorities to treat it as an unusual and potentially dangerous situation right from the start. On the morning of October 13th, 2018, as Carly Gousset's family began searching frantically, several neighbors reported sightings that would later become the last credible accounts of Carly's whereabouts. These observations painted a disjointed yet deeply concerning picture of her final movements. Kenneth Dutton, a neighbor familiar with Carly, claimed to have seen her walking alone through the neighborhood. He recalled that she appeared out of place, barefoot, thin, and holding a piece of paper. Dutton emphasized that he knew Carly personally and was confident in his identification. His account helped establish an approximate time and location for her movement that morning. Another resident, Richard Eddy, also reported seeing someone who matched Carly's description. He described a thin female with long hair, standing by the roadside and staring up at the sky. The detail that she too held a piece of paper caught investigators' attention. Eddy's sighting occurred not far from Dutton's, suggesting a general path Carly may have followed on foot. A third account came from an individual involved in wood collection, often referred to as a wooder. This witness reported seeing a girl matching Carly's appearance near Highway 6, a quiet two-lane stretch that runs through the California desert toward Nevada. The proximity to such an isolated road added urgency to the case. The repeated mention of a piece of paper across all three sightings led authorities to believe it might have been the same therapy worksheet Carly had been writing on the night before during her drug-induced episode. This section places Carly within a specific geographical corridor and time window after her disappearance. The consistency of the eyewitness report strengthens the timeline, but it also intensifies the mystery. Why was she still walking alone, and what was she hoping to find as she wandered into the open desert? Carly Gousset's disappearance has left behind a trail of uncertainty, filled with troubling questions and conflicting interpretations. Even years later, investigators and the public continue to grapple with what happened after Carly was last seen walking near Highway 6. One of the central questions revolves around the marijuana Carly reportedly consumed the night before she vanished. Was it simply marijuana, or was it laced with another substance that triggered her extreme paranoia and erratic behavior? Toxicology tests were never conducted, as she disappeared before medical professionals could evaluate her condition. This gap leaves open a critical unknown that may have shaped everything that followed. Another possibility is that Carly stepped outside simply to get some air or find clarity, only to become disoriented in the darkness and desert terrain. Her mental state, as captured in Melissa's recordings, suggested deep confusion, fear, and distress. This has led some to believe she may have wandered further than expected, perhaps succumbing to the environment. Melissa's decision to record Carly's behavior remains a focal point of debate. Supporters argue it provides crucial insight into Carly's psychological state, preserving real-time evidence of her paranoia and expressions of fear. Detractors question the ethics of recording a minor in distress without intervention or medical assistance. Yet the recordings stand as the last tangible evidence of Carly's presence in the home. Notably, there have been no confirmed signs of a struggle, no concrete evidence of foul play, and no confirmed abduction. Law enforcement has not named any suspects or released a theory of their own. The Mono County Sheriff's Office maintains that the case remains open to all possibilities. Despite multiple eyewitness sightings, the investigation hit a wall due to the complete lack of physical evidence, surveillance footage, or digital footprints. Carly left her phone behind, removing a critical tool that might have helped track her movement or intentions. In the end, the case remains an open mystery, unresolved, unexplained, and painfully silent. In the years following Carly Gussé's disappearance, her family has remained committed to keeping her story alive. Despite the case turning cold, they've continued to hope for her safe return, refusing to let her memory fade. Melissa, her stepmother, took to social media platforms, consistently sharing Carly's photo, missing person details, and updates in hopes of reaching someone who might know something. Her goal has been clear: keep Carly's face and name in the public eye. Carly's father, Zach, has also been vocal in interviews and public statements, emphasizing that their search never stopped. For the family, each day without answers only deepens the pain, but their determination has remained unwavering. They've held on to every possibility, no matter how slim, that Carly is still alive. On May 13th, 2022, what would have been Carly's 20th birthday, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children released an age progression image. This digitally enhanced photo aimed to show what Carly might look like as a young adult. These images are critical in long-term missing person cases, helping the public visualize a person's updated appearance and encouraging continued awareness. In 2021, a new tip surfaced. A recovering drug user came forward, claiming to have seen a girl matching Carly's description at a party. For the family, it brought a flicker of renewed hope. However, investigators were unable to verify the claim, and no credible leads developed from it. Like many tips in cold cases, this one ultimately led nowhere, but it served as a reminder that the possibility of answers still exists. Years later, the emotional toll is undeniable. The absence of closure weighs heavily on the family, but so does the lack of finality. In cases like Carly's, where physical evidence is scarce and leads are fleeting, public attention and hope become the most powerful tools families have left. Carly Gussé's disappearance is defined by a sequence of events that remain as haunting as they are unexplained. In the span of a single night, she went from a seemingly normal teenager to someone overwhelmed by fear and paranoia. The audio recording captured by her stepmother documented Carly's mental unraveling, a raw, unsettling glimpse into her fragile state of mind just hours before she vanished. That morning, eyewitness accounts placed her walking alone through the neighborhood and possibly near Highway 6, clutching what may have been a therapy worksheet. Then, without warning or trace, Carly disappeared, No confirmed sightings have followed. No physical evidence has surfaced. No digital trail was left behind as her phone remained at home. Despite exhaustive efforts by local authorities, the FBI, and volunteers, the case remains unsolved. There is no proof of abduction, no indication of foul play, and no verified conclusion that she left willingly. Law enforcement continues to investigate with all scenarios on the table. For Carly's family, each passing year brings more pain, but also a quiet persistence, the hope that someone, somewhere, might hold the missing piece. Until then, the mystery of what happened on that October morning in Chalfont Valley endures, not as a closed chapter, but as an open wound in a case that refuses to fade. On June 9th, 1995, 6-year-old Morgan Nick vanished from the Alma Little League baseball field in Arkansas. That summer evening was warm and ordinary, filled with the familiar sounds of cheering parents and the crack of bats hitting baseballs. Children laughed and darted across the open field, chasing fireflies while games unfolded under the stadium lights. Morgan was among them, playing with friends near the parking lot that bordered the field. At one point, she stopped to empty sand from her shoe, bending down just a short distance from where her mother, Colleen Nick, was sitting in the stands. When Colleen looked away for only a few moments, Morgan was still there. But when she turned back, her daughter was gone. Morgan's description was quickly broadcast to anyone who could help. She was 4 feet tall, weighed 55 pounds, and had blonde hair and bright blue eyes. That evening, she wore a Girl Scout t-shirt, blue denim shorts, and white tennis shoes. Colleen's brief absence triggered a frantic search that spread rapidly across the ballpark. Parents, players, and bystanders scoured the surrounding area, calling Morgan's name into the dimly lit night. Police responded immediately, stressing how crucial the first hours were. Officers warned that every passing minute placed Morgan in greater danger. Witnesses described a suspicious man seen nearby, watching the children earlier in the evening. Authorities released his description: a white male, about 6 feet tall, medium build, with dark brown and gray hair, possibly a mustache or beard. Investigators also noted 2 attempted kidnappings in western Arkansas within 3 days of Morgan's disappearance, incidents they believed could be connected to the same suspect. That night in Alma, a brief, unremarkable moment turned into a nightmare that would haunt a family and community for decades. In the hours after Morgan Nick's disappearance, the community of Alma and neighboring towns responded with urgency and determination. Friends, family, and volunteers organized almost immediately, printing and distributing thousands of flyers that displayed Morgan's photograph alongside a composite sketch of the suspected abductor. Pink ribbons, chosen because they were Morgan's favorite color, became a symbol of hope and solidarity. They were tied around trees, light poles, and mailboxes, as well as around Morgan's home in Ozark. Residents wore them pinned to their clothing, and entire streets were lined with them as reminders that a 6-year-old girl was still missing. As the search expanded, police received between 1,600 and 1,700 investigative leads. The overwhelming number of tips created a backlog that law enforcement admitted was difficult to manage quickly, but every lead was logged and pursued as resources allowed. Investigators also tried less conventional methods, including hypnotizing a witness who claimed to have seen the abduction. Despite the effort, this approach failed to produce significant new information. Law enforcement officials repeatedly emphasized how critical time was. They stated that Morgan's danger increased with each passing hour, but they refused to abandon hope of recovering her safely. Meanwhile, community members continued to pray and search relentlessly. Volunteers combed through every dirt road and back road they could think of, determined to uncover any trace of the missing child. To encourage more tips, local businesses collectively offered a reward of $7,500. Despite periods of frustration over slow progress, Alma's commitment to finding Morgan never wavered. The earliest leads in Morgan Nick's disappearance centered on witness accounts from the Alma baseball field and nearby areas. The most critical detail released by investigators was the description of the suspected kidnapper: a white male, approximately 6 feet tall, of medium build, with dark brown and gray hair. Witnesses reported he may have had a beard or mustache, and his presence near the children that evening drew attention. Police emphasized that this man might also have been responsible for 2 other attempted kidnappings reported in western Arkansas within 3 days of Morgan's abduction. The possibility that one person was targeting multiple children created urgency, as investigators feared he could strike again, if not located quickly. A witness told police about seeing a suspicious man watching the children play. His vehicle was also described, and it matched reports from the other incidents, reinforcing the likelihood of a connection. These combined accounts became central to the investigation and were immediately circulated through news broadcasts and printed materials. Authorities made repeated appeals to the public, urging residents to report any unusual behavior or suspicious individuals. They stressed that someone in the community likely knew the man in question. As one officer stated, "Somewhere out there are people that know the individual," highlighting how critical public awareness was in breaking the case. Despite hundreds of calls pouring in, frustration grew over the slow pace of progress. Yet the descriptions released in those first days became the foundation of flyers, alerts, and statewide efforts to find Morgan and stop the suspect. 1 year after Morgan Nick's disappearance, her family, friends, and supporters returned to the Alma Little League baseball field to mark what would have been her 7th birthday. The same place where Morgan vanished was transformed into a scene of unity and remembrance, with over 1,000 people gathering to honor her. Attendees joined hands in a circle and released dozens of bright pink balloons into the sky, each symbolizing hope that Morgan would one day return home safely. For Colleen Nick, the gathering carried profound meaning. She called the site a field of bad dreams, but on this day, it became a space filled with determination and faith. Media coverage of the event noted how the people who attended were the ones who still firmly believed Morgan was alive. Colleen's speeches during the rally were described as the driving force behind the perseverance of those present. She spoke passionately about refusing to accept grim statistics, declaring her unwavering belief that Morgan would come home. Her strength had also extended far beyond Alma. By the first anniversary, Colleen had emerged as a national advocate for missing children, speaking at the White House and sharing Morgan's story on programs like Oprah. Around the same time, police received a significant lead from Phoenix, Arizona. Witnesses reported seeing a girl resembling Morgan in a restaurant, with her hair cut bluntly, accompanied by a man whose vehicle matched the abductor's description and carried Arkansas plates. Authorities considered the sighting credible enough to issue a public alert, renewing hope for answers. A major turn in the investigation came when a 36-year-old deaf man from Crawford County gave a videotaped confession to police. In his statement, he admitted that he had gone to the Little League field the night Morgan Nick disappeared. He confessed to raping her and later waking up with blood on his clothes. After seeing reports of the abduction on the news, he said he burned the clothing. According to the affidavit, the man stated that he felt that I did it, directly referring to Morgan's case. Following the confession, law enforcement obtained search warrants for his home and vehicle. During the search, authorities seized a total of 22 items considered potentially relevant to the investigation. Among the items collected were a pink toothbrush, a knife, a wood chisel, and a roll of duct tape containing hair fibers. Several other objects bore dark reddish stains, and investigators also recovered a single long reddish-blonde hair. Each piece of evidence was carefully packaged and sent to the FBI for forensic analysis to determine if it could be connected to Morgan. Despite the weight of the confession and the physical evidence gathered, no immediate charges were filed. investigators emphasized that they needed to wait for the forensic results before proceeding, ensuring that any prosecution would be based on solid, verifiable proof. The suspect was questioned but ultimately released while the testing was underway. This decision caused frustration throughout the community. Many residents voiced outrage that a man who confessed to involvement could walk free, with some insisting he should have been kept in custody. Police officials responded by acknowledging the public's concern, but stressed the need for airtight evidence to prevent mistakes that could compromise the case. They remained in regular contact with the FBI, though they admitted testing could take months, prolonging the uncertainty. Colleen Nick never allowed the confession or its grim details to break her belief that Morgan was alive. She spoke openly about questioning her own thoughts and searching for answers, but said she had never felt any other conclusion. Describing the unexplainable instinct parents often develop, she said she trusted hers completely. Even during the most difficult moments, Colleen emphasized that losing focus would mean no one could do the work required to bring Morgan home. She became the driving force behind continuous efforts to keep her daughter's story in public view. Traveling across the country, she spoke at fundraisers, met with law enforcement agencies, and worked with the Justice Department on specialized training to improve missing child investigations. She also launched Project Hope, an initiative designed to provide emotional and practical support to families experiencing similar tragedies. Her ability to inspire determination in others was noted by community members who said that when Colleen believed, they believed. She repeatedly urged people to keep sending in leads, warning that even if the suspect was guilty, Morgan was not home, and stopping the search would be dangerous. Colleen also spoke about the importance of thorough, careful evidence handling, insisting that it be done correctly so it could hold up in court, whether it implicated the suspect or cleared him. Her composure and leadership became a focal point of media coverage, and many credited her relentless advocacy as the reason Morgan's case remained active and visible long after the initial headlines had faded. In 2010, investigators conducted a search on a property in Spiro, Oklahoma, tied to a person of interest in Morgan Nick's disappearance. At that time, the search warrant authorized only the inspection of the house, leaving the surrounding land untouched. The residence was later demolished, but the individual connected to the site was never conclusively linked to Morgan's case, nor was he fully cleared by authorities. 7 years later, in December 2017, new information unrelated to Morgan's disappearance brought investigators back to the same property. This time, crews executed a meticulous excavation of the land, digging only an inch or two at a time to ensure that nothing significant was overlooked. Forensic pathologists from the State Medical Examiner's Office examined every layer of soil as it was removed. After reaching bedrock at approximately 2 feet, officials confirmed that no well existed on the site and no physical evidence tied to Morgan had been uncovered. The FBI stated they were fully confident that the search had been thorough and that nothing had been missed. Despite the lack of findings, law enforcement emphasized that Morgan's investigation was not a cold case. Officials continued to receive leads and follow up on them regularly, maintaining active efforts even decades after her disappearance. Colleen Nick responded to the outcome by expressing gratitude for the renewed work and reiterating her commitment to fight every day for Morgan's return. Her words reinforced the ongoing resolve shared by both her family and investigators to keep the search alive. In 2021, the FBI publicly named Billy Jack Links as a person of interest in Morgan Nick's disappearance. Links had been arrested in 1995, only 2 months after Morgan vanished, for the attempted abduction of a young girl in Van Buren County. The location of this incident was just 8 miles from the Alma baseball field where Morgan was last seen. Authorities emphasized that crimes against children are rarely isolated acts. Offenders who attempt abductions often repeat their behavior, which made Links's prior arrest highly significant to the investigation. Though he died in prison in 2000, the FBI appealed to the public for help, They urged anyone who knew him, no matter how casually, to come forward with information, stressing that even the smallest, seemingly insignificant detail could provide the missing link to solving the case. During the announcement, Colleen Nick once again shared her unwavering belief that Morgan survived. She reminded everyone of who Morgan was, a 6-year-old girl who loved cats, enjoyed apples, and even considered bubblegum to be its own food group. Morgan dreamed of growing up to be both a circus performer and a doctor, ambitions that reflected her playful personality and limitless imagination. Colleen's message to Morgan was direct and heartfelt. She said that even if Morgan had forgotten who she was or where she came from, her family had never forgotten her. They continued fighting every day to bring her home. This announcement reinforced both the persistence of investigators and the enduring hope surrounding the case. On the evening of January 23, 1999, 2-year-old Tika Lewis was at the New Frontier Lanes bowling alley in Tacoma, Washington. It was league night, the busiest night of the week, and the building was crowded with families, players, and children weaving between the lanes and arcade machines. Among them was Tika, a shy toddler who stood out with her playful energy and her love of the small arcade at the far side of the alley. Her family, including her mother Teresa, her baby sister, her mother's boyfriend, and several uncles, occupied lanes 7 and 8 near the center of the building. They bowled, socialized, and took turns keeping watch on the children, who drifted between the games and the seating area. Tika was especially drawn to the claw machine. With the help of her uncle, she managed to win a stuffed teddy bear, which she immediately gifted to her 10-month-old sister. It was a gesture that reflected her gentle, giving nature. Using coins from the Christmas money she had tucked into her little purse, she returned to the machine and the nearby arcade again and again, captivated by the flashing lights and electronic sounds. Shortly before 10 p.m., she was seen happily playing. But when her mother turned her attention back, Tika was gone. Family members spread out quickly, searching the arcade, the restrooms, and the parking lot. Teresa called her name, checked between machines, and ran outside, but her daughter did not appear. Panic began to rise. Within moments, it became clear that Tika had vanished, and her family realized she could not have simply wandered off. As the search for Tika began inside the bowling alley, witnesses outside recalled something that would become central to the investigation. Around the same time her disappearance was discovered, a maroon Pontiac Grand Am was seen speeding out of the crowded parking lot. The vehicle, described as a 4-door model from the late 1980s or early 1990s, was noted for its dark-tinted windows and a large spoiler attached to the trunk. The sight of a car leaving at such unusual speed from a family-oriented establishment quickly raised suspicions. This sighting was not the only detail provided that night. Another witness described a man behaving strangely inside the building. He was seen following a child near one of the exits, walking close behind as though attempting to blend into the crowd. When investigators collected descriptions, a consistent image emerged. The man was white, in his 30s, with shoulder-length brown hair, a mustache, and heavy facial pockmarks. His nose was noticeably large, and his overall appearance left a memorable impression. For detectives, the overlap between the vehicle fleeing the scene and the sighting of this unidentified man suggested more than coincidence. The possibility that Tika had been abducted and immediately transported away became a strong early theory. Yet, despite canvassing the area, no trace of the Pontiac was recovered, and the suspect described by witnesses was never identified. These accounts gave investigators their first tangible leads, but without physical evidence or confirmation, the case stalled at the very moment hope for quick answers was highest. When Tika vanished from the bowling alley, Tacoma police responded immediately, launching what would become one of the largest searches in the city's history. For the first several hours, investigators treated the disappearance as a possible case of a child wandering away. Yet as time passed and no sign of her appeared, the possibility of abduction took center stage. The initial search extended through the night and into the next day. Police, firefighters, and volunteers scoured a 1.5-mile radius surrounding the bowling alley. Helicopters equipped with thermal imaging cameras hovered overhead, while search dogs worked tirelessly along the wooded areas and nearby fields. Despite the intensity of the operation, no trace of Tika was found. 3 days later, on January 26th, investigators followed the lead of search dogs across the street from the bowling alley. There, hidden beneath a bush, they discovered a pile of men's clothing. The garments appeared recently placed, showing no signs of mold despite the damp January weather. Among the items were an off-white pair of Lee jeans, a dark blue wool pea coat with the letters IS or JS marked on the label, and a plaid Columbia button-down shirt. The find was significant, yet investigators could not connect the clothing directly to Tika's disappearance. As the investigation widened, police interviewed hundreds of patrons who had been inside the bowling alley that night. Canvassing extended to nearby neighborhoods, with door-to-door inquiries attempting to identify anyone who may have witnessed unusual activity. Witness statements about the maroon Pontiac Grand Am and the unidentified man with pockmarked features were collected, but no physical evidence tied them together. Meanwhile, Teresa Lewis, Tika's mother, and other family members fully cooperated with police. Teresa submitted to a polygraph test, which she passed. Other relatives, including uncles and extended family members present that night, also underwent examinations to eliminate suspicion. Tika's father, Robert Lewis, was quickly ruled out as well, since he was incarcerated at the time of her disappearance. Despite extensive efforts, the investigation stalled. Early leads, though promising, produced no concrete results, leaving both investigators and Tika's family with more questions than answers. In the years after Tika Lewis disappeared, investigators and her family faced a series of potential breakthroughs that ultimately ended in disappointment. Each lead offered a brief glimmer of hope before fading into uncertainty. In 2001, the body of an unidentified 4-year-old girl was discovered in Kansas City, Missouri. The child became known as Precious Doe. Authorities quickly noted similarities in age and appearance and considered the possibility that this could be Tika. The discovery brought intense focus to Tacoma, raising the question of whether her case had ended far from home. However, when DNA testing was conducted, the results proved negative. The girl was later identified as Erica Green, a local child, closing that avenue and returning Tika's case to its unresolved status. In 2006, a private investigator hired by the family reported finding a young girl in Texas who bore a striking resemblance to Tika. The girl shared notable physical traits, including earlobes similar to her sister's. Teresa Lewis was convinced, even stating she believed the search might finally be over. But once again, DNA testing was performed, and the results excluded any connection. The child was not Tika, and the family's renewed hope collapsed into grief. 4 years later, in 2010, a stranger approached Teresa during a candlelight vigil. He claimed to have information about Tika's whereabouts. Acting on this tip, law enforcement conducted a search at Point Defiance Park, focusing on an area of dense woodland. Despite a thorough excavation, no evidence was uncovered. These dead ends reflected the painful uncertainty surrounding the case. Each lead, however promising, dissolved into nothing, leaving the family with more unanswered questions and a continuing sense of loss. Over time, investigators pieced together a composite image of the man believed to be responsible for Tika Lewis's disappearance. Witness accounts from the night of January 23, 1999, consistently described a white male in his 30s or 40s, with a medium to heavy build. His hair was shoulder length, curly, and brown. He wore a thick mustache, had pockmarked skin, and was remembered for a prominent, unusually large nose. The physical description was striking enough that multiple individuals who encountered him recalled his features years later. Clothing descriptions added further detail. The man was reportedly dressed in a blue plaid shirt and worn, faded jeans. Witnesses described him moving close to children inside the bowling alley and following at least one child near the exit door. When combined with the sighting of a maroon Pontiac Grand Am speeding from the parking lot at the same time Tika vanished, the outline of a suspect became clearer. Some accounts also linked him to a blue Pontiac Grand Am, raising questions about whether witnesses had seen the same vehicle under different lighting conditions. This profile matched earlier incidents at New Frontier Lanes, including the molestation of a 4-year-old boy in the restroom 2 months prior, and the attempted luring of another child near the arcade. In both cases, the suspect was described as a white man with curly brown hair, reinforcing the possibility of a single predator operating in the area. The case later gained national attention when America's Most Wanted filmed a segment near the bowling alley. Among the spectators who gathered to watch the reenactment, some reported noticing a man whose appearance mirrored the suspect's description, particularly the heavily pockmarked face. His presence was suspicious enough to be reported to law enforcement, though it yielded no direct breakthrough. Despite these consistent accounts and recurring details, law enforcement never identified a suspect by name or made an arrest. The image of the possible abductor remained vivid, yet the lack of physical evidence meant the case continued without resolution. More than 2 decades after her disappearance, the case of Tika Lewis remains unresolved. Despite thousands of hours spent investigating, interviewing witnesses, and following leads, no arrests have ever been made. The Tacoma Police Department continues to classify her case as active, and detectives still appeal to the public for any information that could provide answers. Throughout the years, Tika's family has worked tirelessly to ensure her story is not forgotten. Annual vigils are held in her honor, where relatives, friends, and community members gather to remember the little girl who vanished on a winter night in 1999. These gatherings serve as both a memorial and a public reminder that her case is still open. For Teresa Lewis, Tika's mother, these events are painful but necessary. She has consistently voiced her belief that her daughter was abducted and could not have simply walked away from the bowling alley on her own. In December 2022, law enforcement released an updated age progression image of Tika, depicting how she might look as a 26-year-old adult. This visual tool was intended to spark recognition and generate new leads from anyone who might have seen her in recent years. The release reflected ongoing efforts to re-engage the public and keep attention focused on her disappearance. Tika's case also led to long-term change. Tika's bill was passed, establishing a Washington State Patrol task force dedicated to missing and exploited children, ensuring better coordination across agencies. Today, theories persist, whether involving serial predation, trafficking, or illegal adoption, but no definitive answers have surfaced. Authorities urge anyone with knowledge about the case to contact the Tacoma Police Department or Crime Stoppers of Central Indiana, as even the smallest detail could finally bring resolution. On September 24, 1965, 18-year-old Jacqueline Rains Crackman was last seen at her parents' home in Columbus, Ohio. That day, she left her 2 young children in their care, explaining that she would be attending a wedding in Glenwood, Iowa with her roommate. It was meant to be a short trip, lasting only a weekend, but Jackie never came home. She never returned to collect her children, and from that moment forward, she seemed to vanish completely. Her parents, alarmed by her absence, soon discovered that her roommate had returned. When questioned, the roommate admitted to dropping Jackie off somewhere, but refused to reveal the location. The vagueness of her response left the family with more questions than answers. Years later, investigators would learn that the couple married in Glenwood that weekend had no knowledge of Jackie or her companion, raising suspicion that the story of the wedding may have been a cover for something else. At the time, Jackie's life was already in turmoil. She had married, young at just 16, and given birth shortly after. By 1965, the marriage had collapsed. her estranged husband filed for divorce in September, leaving her navigating the emotional strain of separation. According to her sister, Jackie had packed 2 full suitcases for what was supposed to be a brief wedding trip. The detail was striking. Why would she take so much with her if she truly intended to be away for only a few days? When her car was later located parked outside her home, the suitcases were missing. Jackie, and everything connected to her departure, had disappeared. Exactly 1 month later, on October 24th, 1965, another disappearance occurred. This time, it was 31-year-old Melvin Uphoff of Rising City, Nebraska. That day, Melvin spent time with his wife and 4 children, then joined his parents for dinner. Everything seemed ordinary, routine. But that night, as his wife prepared the children for bed, Melvin told her he was stepping out to buy beer. He never came back. Melvin left behind more than just uncertainty. He vanished with his coin collection and his car, a 1954 Oldsmobile. Neither the vehicle nor its owner were ever found. His sudden disappearance paralleled Jackie's in both timing and mystery. Within local communities, rumors began to circulate. Whispers suggested that Jackie and Melvin had been involved in an affair and that the two had fled together to start new lives. The speculation grew in the absence of evidence. No confirmed sightings, no recovered belongings, and no confessions surfaced. For both families, silence became the defining reality. 6 children, collectively left behind, grew up without answers. Jackie's sister later revealed that authorities in 1965 showed little interest in investigating. "I really don't think there was an investigation," she explained. "If there was, it didn't amount to much." A documentary released in 2008 confirmed this absence of follow-up. Key figures, including Jackie's roommate and her estranged husband, had never been interviewed at the time of her disappearance. Over the years, faint glimmers of hope emerged but never solidified. Jackie's sister recalled once seeing a woman resembling Jackie at their mother's funeral. The same woman appeared again at her workplace, but left quickly before she could be approached. These moments lingered as haunting possibilities. Had Jackie returned briefly, watching from a distance but unwilling to reveal herself? Decades stretched on without answers. Melvin was declared legally dead in the 1970s, though no body or trace of him was ever recovered. For the families, time did not dull the loss. Each passing year only deepened the mystery, solidifying the sense that both Jackie and Melvin had disappeared into a void. Then, in May of 2009, after 44 years of silence, the truth was finally uncovered. Authorities successfully tracked down both Jackie and Melvin. Speaking with them by phone, investigators learned that the pair had indeed left their families behind to start a new life together. They had not been kidnapped, murdered, or lost in an accident. Instead, they had made a choice, one that changed the trajectory of multiple families forever. Nebraska State Patrol spokeswoman Deb Collins confirmed the outcome. The couple had committed no crimes. They left of their own free will, seeking a future that did not include the lives they had once lived. Out of respect for their privacy, officials did not disclose where they were living. Whether they attempted to reconnect with the children they abandoned remains unclear. The revelation was both an answer and another wound. On one hand, the mystery was solved. Jackie and Melvin had not been victims of foul play. On the other, the confirmation brought a painful reality. For over 4 decades, their families had suffered, uncertain and grieving, only to learn that the loss had been intentional. 6 children had grown up without parents, not because of tragedy beyond anyone's control, but because of a deliberate decision. This case highlights not only the silence of law enforcement during the 1960s, but also the lasting consequences of unanswered disappearances. For years, loved ones endured anguish, while rumors took the place of truth. When clarity finally came, it was not through a dramatic discovery of evidence or witness testimony, but through the simple act of tracking down 2 people who had chosen to walk away. The story of Jackie and Melvin is striking because it embodies the complexity of disappearance. It was not the result of crime, but its impact was no less devastating. Their families were left with scars of abandonment, while the couple themselves managed to carve out private lives beyond the reach of those they had left behind. In February of 1996, 14-year-old Tanya Kosh vanished from McKeesport, Pennsylvania. A middle school student, she had been navigating the turbulence of adolescence in an environment already weighed down by family conflict and bullying at school. But what no one could have foreseen was that her disappearance would not be the result of a stranger's abduction, but the culmination of months of manipulation by a man who should have been entrusted with student safety. Thomas Hose, a security guard at Tanya's middle school, was 24 years her senior. Their relationship began when he caught her skipping class. Rather than disciplining her, he promised not to report the incident. That seemingly small gesture created an opening. Jose positioned himself as someone who understood her struggles, gradually gaining her trust. Over time, he began drawing her out of class, talking with her privately, and presenting himself as a sympathetic listener. He also started offering gifts, candy, flowers, even money for cigarettes. These tokens, though modest, created a bond. To Tanya, they seemed like evidence of care. At home, Tanya's parents were going through a bitter divorce. At school, she faced unrelenting bullying. She was vulnerable, and Jose exploited this vulnerability. Slowly, he convinced her that she would be better off with him, away from her fractured family and the classmates who tormented her. When he kissed her in a stairwell, Tanya believed she was experiencing love. By February 10th, 1996, she had resolved to leave her old life behind. She arrived at Jose's house, expecting refuge. Instead, she stepped into a nightmare that would last a decade. Jose lived with his parents and adult son. To conceal Tanya, he confined her to his bedroom. She was not allowed to attend school, see her friends, or leave the room. He enforced complete control, forcing her to use a bucket as a toilet, feeding her with leftover scraps, and subjecting her to repeated sexual abuse. Jose demanded that she document these acts in journals, not as a way of confessing, but as trophies he could later brag about to friends and co-workers. The abuse was sustained through fear. Jose threatened her with death if she disobeyed. He told her he could kill her in her sleep, place her in a garbage bag, and throw her in the river. Fear immobilized Tanya. She remained silent and compliant, her adolescence consumed by captivity. Years slipped away in isolation. When Tanya turned 18, the circumstances shifted. Jose introduced her to his family under a false identity, Nikki Allen. To them, she was not a kidnapped teenager, but his girlfriend who would be moving in permanently. By giving her a new name, Jose created a layer of deception that concealed her true story. He began allowing her outside the house, though under strict conditions. Tanya later explained that he trusted her to return because he knew she was brainwashed. These initial outings were disorienting. She was free to walk the streets or attend church, but she did so under his instructions, hyper-aware of time and curfews. She felt like a deer caught in headlights, physically outside the prison of his room, but mentally still trapped by his control. One of her new destinations was JJ's Deli Mart, a local store owned by Joe Sparrow. There, Tanya began working part-time. For the first time in years, she experienced a glimpse of normal human connection. She built friendships with Joe and her co-workers, observing the ordinary warmth of family interactions. This contrast revealed to her how distorted her own situation had become. "I saw how a family should be," Tanya later reflected, "and I said, that's what I want." Gradually, trust developed between Tanya and Joe. After 10 years of silence, she finally confided in him. She told him to search a missing children's website and promised he would find her picture there. Joe, stunned, contacted his son, a retired police officer familiar with her case. The chain of disclosure moved quickly. Authorities were notified, and investigators soon descended on Jose's residence. In 2006, after a decade of Tanya's captivity, Thomas Hose was arrested. The evidence was overwhelming. In 2007, he pled guilty to multiple charges: statutory sexual assault, corruption of a minor, and aggravated indecent assault, among others. He was sentenced to 15 years in prison. For Tanya, the courtroom became a stage for reclaiming her voice. In her victim impact statement, she declared to Jose that she was no longer his puppet. With strength, she told him, "You took away my innocence, my childhood. You made me think my family didn't want me or love me, that no one cared or loved me but you. For 10 years, you controlled me." Her words transformed years of silence into defiance. Life after her release was not without complexity, but Tanya emerged determined to rebuild. In 2017, she co-authored a memoir of a milk carton kid, The Tanya Koch Story, recounting her ordeal in her own words. In 2018, she married and became a stepmother, finding stability in the kind of family life she had long yearned for. Her relationship with her father initially seemed supportive, but eventually fractured when he suggested she bore some responsibility for what happened. That rift caused estrangement. With her mother, however, Tanya found closeness and support. Her mother helped her heal, offering the consistent care that had been absent during Tanya's formative years. In later years, Tanya encountered Joe again, the man who had played a pivotal role in her escape. They reconnected, reflecting on how his willingness to listen and act had saved her from another lost decade. Today, Tanya dedicates her life to speaking openly about grooming and exploitation. She emphasizes that while technology and culture may change, the strategies predators use remain consistent. "We're in a different era," she explained, "but that stuff hasn't changed. How they groom you, how they lure you in, and how they mentally hold power over you." Her survival and recovery underscore the importance of awareness, community, and intervention. Her story illustrates the devastating effects of manipulation and abuse, but also the possibility of resilience and renewal. The case of Tanya Koch stands as a reminder of how a trusted figure can exploit vulnerabilities, how captivity can extend beyond physical walls into psychological control, and how one act of courage, confiding in another person, can unravel years of secrecy. Her ordeal demonstrates the enduring dangers of grooming, the long-lasting scars of exploitation, and the essential role of supportive individuals in breaking cycles of abuse. On April 26, 1964, Paul Joseph Franczak was born at Michael Reese Hospital in Chicago, Illinois. His parents, Chester and Dora Franczak, were overjoyed by the arrival of their newborn son. But only one day later, that joy turned into devastation. A woman, dressed as a nurse, entered Dora's hospital room and told her that the doctor wanted to examine the baby. Trusting the apparent nurse, Dora handed over her infant. The woman never returned. Paul had been kidnapped. The abduction triggered one of the largest manhunts in Chicago's history. More than 200 police officers, 175,000 postal workers, and the FBI joined the search. 600 homes were canvassed within the first 24 hours. Yet despite the scale of the investigation, no trace of the missing baby emerged. Newspaper headlines spread the story across the country. Dora and Chester pleaded for their child's return, but their pleas went unanswered. For 2 years, the Franczaks grieved the loss of their son. Then, in 1966, the FBI contacted them with news of a potential lead. A toddler, abandoned the year before in a Newark, New Jersey shopping center, had been placed into foster care. Authorities named him Scott McKinley. The child had been found in a stroller with a black eye, and despite widespread publicity, no one came forward to claim him. Out of thousands of infants reviewed during the investigation, this boy was the only one authorities could not rule out as Paul. Chester and Dora traveled to New Jersey and met the toddler. They chose to believe he was their missing son. Dora later explained that she faced an impossible choice: to declare uncertainty and return him to the system, or to claim him as her own and raise him. She chose the latter, and from then on, Scott McKinley was known as Paul Franczak. For many years, life continued quietly. Paul grew up in the Franczak household, loved as a son. Yet questions began to stir when he was 10 years old. Searching for Christmas presents in the crawl space of his family's home, he discovered newspaper clippings about the kidnapping. Confronting his parents, he was told that, yes, he had been kidnapped as a baby, but that the authorities had found him and brought him home. "We found you, we love you, and that's all you need to know," they told him. But for Paul, that reassurance did not erase the doubt. He began to wonder about his true origins. As he grew older, the questions deepened. Who was he really? Where had he come from? In 2012, Paul decided to seek definitive answers. He convinced his parents to take DNA tests alongside him. Although they initially agreed, they later asked him not to submit the results. He did so anyway. The outcome was life-shattering. There was no biological connection between Paul and the Franczaks. The child they had raised for decades was not their son. Paul described the moment as the collapse of his identity. Everything he thought he knew, his birthday, his medical history, even his heritage, was suddenly false. He was not Polish, not Catholic, not even a Taurus as he had always believed. He was, in essence, a stranger to himself. The revelation launched a new search, this time not for a missing baby, but for Paul's own identity. In 2013, a group of volunteer genealogists known as the DNA Detectives took up the case. Using genetic testing and family tree analysis, they traced Paul's origins. In 2015, they uncovered the truth. His real name was Jack Rosenthal, born in 1963 in Atlantic City, New Jersey. He had a twin sister, Jill. Both children had vanished from public view in 1965. The Rosenthal family's history was troubled. Relatives recalled that Jack and Jill were severely neglected. Their father struggled with PTSD and anger issues, while their mother battled alcoholism. Witnesses described the twins being confined, even kept in a cage. A babysitter once discovered them in a filthy room, sitting in cribs with unchanged sheets, both children dirty and uncared for. Jack was seen with a black eye. Eventually, the twins disappeared. Family members noticed their absence, but the parents, Gilbert and Marie Rosenthal, always offered excuses. No clear explanation was ever given. When Paul learned of this, he reflected that his biological parents had been cruel and neglectful. He expressed gratitude that he had been abandoned because it gave him a chance at a better life with the Fronsacs. Still, one question haunted him. What happened to his twin, Jill? Paul initially believed that Jill had died and that he was abandoned because the parents could not explain having only one surviving twin. Later, he came to suspect that Jill might still be alive. The National Center for Missing and Exploited Children even created an age-progressed image of what she might look like as an adult, though no photographs of Jill as an infant existed. Despite efforts, she has never been located. Meanwhile, the mystery of the original kidnapping remained unresolved. If Paul was not the Fronsac son, then where was the real baby? The answer came decades later. In 2019, investigators identified him as Kevin Ray Batty, living under a different name. Kevin had been raised by a woman named Lorraine Fountain, who returned from Arkansas in the 1960s, suddenly caring for a baby. How she obtained him remains unknown. Many questions still remain in this case. It is not clear who kidnapped Paul from the hospital, or what became of his twin sister, Jill. Some mysteries may never be fully solved, and there you have the facts. In 1991, 63-year-old Vasile, also known as Vil Gorgos, was living in eastern Romania. He was a cattle farmer and trader, a man whose livelihood often required regular trips away from home. These business journeys had become routine, and while his family was accustomed to his absences, they relied on his consistent reliability. Each time he left, he informed them of his plans, stayed in contact, and returned when he said he would. For his family, that trust formed a pattern they believed would never break. But in the summer of 1991, something did break, and what began as another ordinary trip became the starting point of one of Romania's most bewildering mysteries. Vasile had purchased his train ticket, as usual, and departed on what was supposed to be a standard business journey. When he did not return, the first reaction among his family was confusion. Days passed without word, then weeks, and eventually months. The silence was uncharacteristic and alarming. His family contacted the police, hoping for answers, but the investigation turned up no meaningful leads. No witnesses came forward, no signs of foul play appeared, and no evidence explained his disappearance. With time, the grim realization set in that he was gone. As months stretched into years, his family began to mourn him as dead. Memorial services were held, and grief slowly replaced the lingering hope of his return. For 30 years, the family carried the weight of that absence. They imagined his final moments, wondering if they had been violent or accidental, yet never knowing. Then, on August 29, 2021, everything changed. A car pulled up outside his home, and stepping out was none other than Vasile himself, now 93 years old. The sight was as shocking as it was surreal. He was wearing the same clothes he had disappeared in 3 decades earlier. In his pockets were his original train ticket and his identification card from 1991. He carried nothing else, no luggage, no signs of 30 years lived elsewhere. What was perhaps even more unsettling was that he had not arrived on his own. He had been brought there by a vehicle, and the driver sped off before anyone could ask questions or record a license plate number. Family members rushed to greet him, overwhelmed but equally disoriented. On first sight, His son did not even recognize him. Physically, he appeared well, showing no signs of abuse or neglect. Doctors confirmed that he was in good health for a man of his age, aside from minor neurological issues common in the elderly. Yet, what was missing was far more troubling than what was present. He could recall details of his life before 1991 with clarity: his parents, his marriage, his work with cattle. But when it came to the missing 30 years, his mind was blank. He could not remember where he had been, or what had happened during the decades in which his family believed him dead. The emotional reunion was complicated by confusion. He struggled to recognize his two children, whose lives had unfolded in his absence. When asked questions, his answers often drifted into fragments about farming, cattle, and the past, without offering clarity about where he had been. His son noted that he did not understand him and described his words as inconsistent and disconnected. The reappearance of Vasile ignited a storm of speculation. Social media and armchair detectives offered theories. Perhaps he had abandoned his family for another life, or perhaps he had been imprisoned for decades, or perhaps he had been kidnapped and forced into labor. None of these explanations could be confirmed, and Vasile himself provided no answers. To this day, his whereabouts between 1991 and 2021 remain completely unknown. What is left is a story without resolution, one of absence, return, and unanswered questions. Among Romania's modern mysteries, the case of Vasile Gorgos stands out as both extraordinary and deeply unsettling. Gabriel Nagy. On January 21, 1987, Gabriel Nagy, an accounting student and father of two, began his day in Sydney, Australia, much like any other. He worked during the day while also pursuing his studies at night, balancing his responsibilities with his role as a husband and father to 9-year-old Jennifer and 11-year-old Stephen. That morning, he phoned his wife Pam and told her he would return home for lunch. Pam prepared a meal, waiting for him to arrive, but Gabriel never walked through the door. What initially seemed like a minor delay soon became the start of a decades-long mystery. By the next day, investigators became directly involved when Gabriel's burned-out car was discovered abandoned. The condition of the vehicle raised immediate alarm. It was not simply left behind. It had been deliberately destroyed, leaving little trace of what had occurred. With Pam filing a missing persons report, the search began. Gabriel was considered a reliable man, punctual, communicative, and dependable. For him to disappear without warning, leaving his family without explanation, was deeply uncharacteristic. In the weeks that followed, missing posters circulated and police searched for leads. The only tangible clue came when records showed Gabriel had withdrawn cash from an ATM in Newcastle, 93 miles away from Sydney. Yet the withdrawal led nowhere. Investigators were unable to connect it to any wider trail. After that, the case grew cold. The family endured the silence, holding on to hope in the early years, but slowly confronting the likelihood that something tragic had occurred. Time stretched on, and 2 years became 5, then 10, then 20. By the mid-2000s, Gabriel had been gone for 2 decades, and legal proceedings were underway to declare him dead. Just before that declaration became official in 2007, one detective decided to give the case a final review. It was this persistence that changed everything. In a database search, she discovered a Medicare record under Gabriel's name. The record led authorities north, to Mackay, nearly 1,000 miles away from where his car had once been found. When investigators arrived, they discovered Gabriel alive, living under the name Ron Sanders. His appearance had aged with time, and his life had taken a dramatically different course. He explained that he had been living under this identity for years, surviving through odd jobs on fishing boats, construction sites, and periods of homelessness. He admitted to using alcohol heavily, relying on it as a way to cope. Most striking was his memory. Gabriel could not recall his past life as a husband and father. He remembered little of his time before his disappearance, except fragments. He recalled being in Newcastle, where his car had been abandoned, and suffering a bleeding head wound. He carried a scar on the back of his head, evidence of an injury that many believe triggered dissociative fugue, a rare psychological disorder involving memory loss and wandering. In Mackay, a local pastor had recently offered him work and a place to stay, giving him stability. It was through this support that Gabriel sought a Medicare card, inadvertently leaving a trail that reconnected him with his old identity. The reunion with his family was emotional and complicated. Investigators provided him with letters written by Pam, his children, and his parents. For Gabriel, reading those words triggered profound emotion. His daughter Jennifer sent him a text message that simply read, "Hi, Dad." He later recalled that it was enough to bring him to tears. Soon after, he spoke with Pam on the phone, their conversation lasting until the battery ran out. Today, Gabriel remains in contact with his wife and grown children, though they do not live together. His case is remembered as one of extraordinary rediscovery, a reminder of how trauma and memory can erase entire lives, only for them to resurface decades later. Mary Louise Day. Mary Louise Day was born in 1968 in Little Falls, New York. Her early life was shaped by instability and neglect. She was the oldest of 3 children, born to Charles and Charlotte Day, but her childhood was disrupted by her mother's inability to care for the children consistently. As a result, Mary and her sisters moved in and out of foster homes. When her parents eventually divorced, Charlotte remarried, taking William Hull as her new husband. The family expanded when Charlotte and William had 2 more children together, and custody arrangements shifted. Mary and her sister Kathy returned to live with their mother and stepfather, while their youngest sister Sherry remained in foster care. The family relocated to Hawaii for William's military service, but tragedy soon struck. Mary's biological father, Charles, died in an accident, leaving the sisters an inheritance that they secretly referred to by the codename Mohawk. In 1980, when Mary was 12 years old, she was removed from Charlotte and William's custody after authorities discovered that William had physically abused her. She remained in Hawaii for a time, but she was later sent back into her mother and stepfather's home when the family moved to Seaside, California. On the night of July 15, 1981, the fragile arrangement collapsed. According to accounts, William attacked Mary physically after accusing her of poisoning his dog. Mary was only 13 years old. By the following morning, she was gone. Unlike many missing children, she was never reported missing by her mother or stepfather. When Kathy asked where Mary was, Charlotte told her simply that Mary had run away and instructed her never to ask again. Years later, Charlotte repeated the same explanation to Sherry, even adding unverified claims that Mary had fallen into drugs and sex work. She admitted to destroying all photographs of her eldest daughter. Within the household, Mary's existence became an unspoken subject, erased by silence and avoidance. It was not until 1994, more than a decade later, that Sherry filed an official missing persons report for her sister. Investigators found a deeply troubling history. Neighbors in Seaside did not remember Mary, and records revealed that she had not been enrolled in school after the family's relocation. Kathy revealed that she had witnessed William's violence toward Mary on the night of her disappearance, recalling that her sister had been bleeding from the mouth. She also described being expelled from the home as a teenager, forced to fend for herself. During interviews, Charlotte and William gave inconsistent statements. Charlotte claimed her husband had reported Mary missing, but no such record existed. William later admitted he had assaulted Mary that night, but denied knowledge of what happened afterward. Investigators grew increasingly suspicious. Cadaver dogs alerted to possible human remains in the family's garden, where a child's shoe was found, though no body was recovered. Later, dogs again signaled at another property where the family had lived, raising speculation that a body may have once been buried and moved. Authorities began preparing a homicide case, suspecting foul play. Then, in 2005, an unexpected development changed the direction of the investigation. During a routine traffic stop in Arizona, police found a woman carrying identification in the name of Mary Day. She was questioned, and she claimed to be the missing girl, now an adult who had run away in 1981 to escape abuse. Investigators were skeptical. She spoke with a heavy Southern accent that Mary had never possessed, and her story lacked details. Still, DNA testing confirmed that she was biologically Charlotte's daughter. The woman reunited with her sisters. Sherry welcomed her into her home in North Carolina, and Kathy also reconnected, though with lingering doubts. Photographs and records eventually confirmed her identity, though questions remained. She had limited memory of her childhood, forgetting details like the inheritance or the code word Mohawk. Suspicion lingered, but evidence showed that she had indeed lived with others after running away, including time with a woman named Marie Kimmel, who provided shelter during the early 1980s. Over time, the doubts faded as investigators closed the case, acknowledging that Mary had survived and returned. Yet the mystery of her lost years never fully disappeared. In 2017, at the age of 49, Mary Day died, leaving behind a story marked by trauma, absence, and unanswered questions. Her disappearance and reappearance remain among the most complex missing person cases in American memory. The stories of Vassili Gorgos, Gabrielle Nagy, and Mary Day demonstrate that disappearance does not always lead to permanent absence. In rare and perplexing circumstances, missing individuals return, but instead of bringing complete closure, their reappearance often deepens the mystery. Each of these cases presents questions that remain unanswered, leaving families and investigators suspended between relief and uncertainty. If you found this video informative, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. These unsolved cases deserve to stay in the spotlight until answers are finally found.